I remember a long time ago reading a theory on Hitler and his anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, generally on that whole topic. And I found that the theory so fascinating, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. But the theory went something like this, that Hitler had no real intention of doing the Holocaust, of actually killing all the Jews. He didn't actually want to exterminate them. He only wanted to use them as leverage because, according to his ideology, his worldview, the Jews control the world, right? Let's not forget that the Nazis more or less thought that Jews controlled the entire planet. You know, every nation from the UK to the United States, Russia, Soviet Union at the time, they controlled everything. So when the writing was on the wall and people kind of started to see that, oh, hey, I'm Jewish and the Nazis just came to power, maybe it's time for me to leave, they kind of made it more difficult for the Jews to leave. They actually stood in the way. They didn't want them to go, not because they necessarily wanted to kill them, but because they wanted to keep them as leverage. And that this whole theory kind of ties in with this little story from Hanf Stengel's memoir. So he talks about this Jewish lawyer from New York named Maxie Steuer who wanted to fund Jewish trips back to America. So, you know, Jews have had a history of migration, right? So it was just kind of like a no-brainer. When one country gets too anti-Semitic or, you know, they have some kind of problem with you for whatever reason, you just leave, right? That's just kind of how it goes. Or, I mean, you risk whatever else happening to you, right? So Hanf Stengel thought this was a pretty good idea, right? I mean, after all, he was a Nazi. He was an anti-Semite. Let's acknowledge that. And he went to ask Hitler about it. And he was like, well, getting rid of them is better than killing them, right? So he figured that Hitler would go for it. But Hitler actually said no. And he said this, quote, "We need the Jews as hostages." And this little story kind of sheds a little bit of legitimacy on that whole theory, that Hitler wanted to not let the Jews leave, but use them as leverage or as hostages later on. And what's even scarier is that despite being this monster, really, I mean, could you imagine using men, women, and children, families as hostages or leverage in your country for geopolitical maneuverings, right? I mean, just what an evil thing to do. And what's even scarier is that he was not universally recognized as evil at the time. This is the part of history that people don't really talk about that much. The way World War II is generally portrayed is that, you know, Hitler came to power and he was evil and everyone knew he was evil and then we all teamed up and we stopped him and that was the end of that. That's not how it went. There were a lot of people in high society, in Western nations, people with big names that you probably heard about that knew Hitler, or they were friends with Hitler, or they had some kind of connection with him or the Nazi Party generally. I mean, just to name a few people here, we have Henry Ford, the big automobile guy, Charles Lindbergh, Lloyd George. These guys were all admirers or friends of Hitler. And Lloyd George was even scarier because he was a big-time British politician at the time. He even signed a photo to Hitler and, you know, he wrote on it, "To Chancellor Hitler, in admiration of his courage, determination, and leadership." And that's a little scary when you think about it. There were a lot of people, even though they weren't drunk on the Kool-Aid, they weren't drunk on the ideology, they were from admirers from afar. And I almost see that as, you know, it's morally, I don't know what to say about it, right? But I think it kind of does show that Hitler was really as good at propaganda as they say he was. And I think a lot of this was, especially with Lloyd George, because he wanted what was best for the UK, not necessarily anyone else. He saw Hitler as leading the new world superpower. And he was not the only person in the British Empire that felt this way. If World War II wouldn't have happened, there's a good chance that Germany, with or without Hitler, becomes the next world superpower.